Hey, it's Erin Atry with Make This Your Year. And in this video, we're going to talk about intuitive eating versus mindful eating. No, they're not the same thing. There is a difference. Mindful eating is what I recommend to my clients. It's what I do. It's what I talk about. And that is just being present in the moment when you're eating. So don't be distracted. Don't eat so fast you can't taste it. Don't eat anything straight out of the package like a zombie, right? All that good stuff. Put your fork down between bites. So it just is making an effort to taste your food and enjoy it. Be mindful, right? We should all make an effort to eat mindfully every time we eat. Intuitive eating is different. It's what people call food freedom, which sounds great in theory, but I don't think it's a good idea in the real world. It's one of those things that's like good on paper, but in my experience, intuitive eating leads to weight gain. Because if you tell yourself you can eat whenever you're hungry, and then you find yourself in a tempting environment, like you're at the movies and you smell popcorn, or you're at the bakery and you smell cookies, you're going to be hungry every time, right? So I'm all for listening to your body's signals. I'm all for listening to your gut if it's trying to tell you something. But in the case of eating, you have to give yourself some parameters. You have to set some parameters for yourself. And most people's definition of intuitive eating doesn't involve any restriction around the around the quality of food they eat. So instead of deciding they're only going to eat the clean foods that their body wants and needs and knows what to do with, they will allow themselves to eat whatever they want. But their parameter is only eat when you're hungry, stop eating when you're not hungry. Other than that, go for it, no limits. So the only parameter that they're limiting is quantity. And here's why that doesn't work. When we eat protein or fat or fiber, it triggers our satiety signal at a certain point. Like after a certain volume of food is in your stomach, we'll get the signal that we're full. But sugar does not trigger that signal. It's very hard to feel full in the presence of sugar. And so if the point of intuitive eating is to use your fullness as an intuitive signal that you've eaten enough, well, that signal comes from leptin. So they want us to fully trust the signals that our leptin sends to our brain. That's fine as long as your leptin is perfectly balanced and in perfect working order, which means you don't have any insulin resistance and you get a great night's sleep every single night and you don't eat sugar, because that throws off the signal altogether. That's the only scenario I see intuitive eating maybe working, except that it also ignores our body's other system for regulating appetite and food intake, our reward system. So before I talk about the reward system, I'd love it if you could please like this video or leave me a comment, subscribe to my channel. And if you know anyone else who would like these videos, please share with them. It really does help me out. I'm a woman on a mission to help 10,000 women over 40 learn how to shed the weight permanently and live the rest of their lives in their dream bodies. Okay, so the brain's reward system works exactly like the gold star sticker system works in kindergarten. When you do something your teacher or your brain likes, you get rewarded with a gold star. In our case, the gold star is a hit of dopamine, and it feels good. It's literally a little burst of happiness. And the reason we have this reward system is to encourage us to do the things we need to do to survive and thrive and reproduce. But it was developed in an ancient world of hunting and gathering that doesn't look anything like the world we live in now. So there's a disconnect there, and it doesn't work perfectly anymore. So dopamine is what gets us to do the things that our brain thinks that we should be doing. Without dopamine, we wouldn't be motivated enough to do it. When I get fascinated with lab rat studies sometimes. So when they do lab experiments with lab rats, they can alter their brain's response to dopamine. And they will make it so that they never get the dopamine signal. And the rats that never get a dopamine signal just sit there in their cage all day doing nothing. They aren't motivated to eat, to drink, to mate, to run around, to socialize, nothing. So that's what, perhaps, let's assume that's what we would be like without dopamine. We wouldn't want to do anything. So dopamine increases the likelihood of us engaging in a behavior. And so the idea is that the behaviors that are rewarded are the ones we should be doing, including eating, because in the time of hunter-gatherer, eating helped us survive. Now it sends us to an early grave. But Foods high in sugar and carbs cause a higher dopamine burst than others, because those are the foods that would have had important sources of calories in the wild, like ripe fruit or something, right? Also, foods that are high in glutamate cause a high dopamine burst too. That's the flavor that's found in meat and MSG, which makes sense because that would reward us for finding a high protein meal like meat. So our brains have decided that these foods get a larger reward because they're contributing to our survival, perhaps. So our brains reinforce the behavior of eating these foods by giving us a dopamine burst. And we each have our own unique dopamine patterns to specific foods because they're conditioned preferences that develop over time and get stronger and stronger over time. So someone from France might not get as big of a burst from Chinese food as someone from China, but the basic building blocks are the same. We all start from approximately the same starting point, which is foods that are sweet and starchy and meaty or umami flavored, which is the flavor of MSG. So is it possible to be addicted to food? Is food addiction a real thing? Well, the essence of addiction is when dopamine reaches very high levels and reinforces behaviors so strongly that they take priority over your natural behaviors. Addiction is basically a really, really strong habit reinforced by dopamine. So most of us aren't so addicted to food that it interferes with work or our family lives. But if we're overeating and acting against our better judgment and against our self-interest, what would you call it? Like if you overindulge in sugar and junk food and you feel terrible the next day, almost like a hangover, and say, I'll never do that again, but then you do, it has a lot of the same characteristics as addiction, right? So I believe we live in a world of processed foods that are engineered to be addictive by hijacking both of our body systems for regulating appetite. So leptin is the hormone that signals to our brain that we're full, and it does not get triggered when we eat sugar. So we don't get the signal to stop eating. And if we have insulin resistance, or if we don't get a lot of deep sleep every night, that's going to affect our leptin levels. So it's not a perfect system that we can blindly trust. And then the other system to regulate eating is our reward system. And that system favors foods that are sweet, starchy, and meaty. So we get a dopamine burst when we eat them. And don't think the food companies don't know this. They do experiments with their recipes and they measure the dopamine levels in people's brains as they eat their foods. And the recipe that wins is the one that has the most sugar and carbs and MSG that they could possibly squeeze in there, because that's what will get us to eat the most. And it'll keep us coming back again and again because it triggers that reward system, which is the basis of addiction, right? So the bottom line is just stick to mindful eating. Like eat only when you're hungry and stop eating when you're hungry, sure. But also with parameters, try to eat clean, healthy, whole foods that are not processed so that your body's systems actually have a fighting chance at regulating your appetite. If you're hungry and you have a Pop-Tart, you can no longer rely on your intuitive signals to give you the right answer of when you're not hungry or when you're going to be hungry next. But if you have a balanced whole meal with, protein, fat, fiber, then you'll have the satiety signals without being hijacked by the sugar. If you want to keep doing what you're doing and hope it's somehow going to get you a different result, then I can't help you. But if you've reached the point where you're ready to make a commitment so that you can learn to eat mindfully and stop overeating and finally shed those extra stubborn pounds on your body, then book your free weight loss call with me and we'll talk about how I help women over 40 do exactly that. I'd love to talk about how I could help. So go to erinadry.com or click the link in the description and choose the time that works best for you. And if it's a fit, we can chat about it. I can answer any questions you have and really see if it's a good fit for you. But don't wait, because the spots do fill up. And there's no better time than literally right now to become the best version of yourself. If you love this video, give me a big thumbs up, or better yet, subscribe to this channel and you'll be informed when I release a new video. But I want to hear what you think. Comment below. Tell me, have you tried mindful eating before or intuitive eating? How'd it go? Let me know in the comments section and I'll see you in the next video. You got this, ladies. I look forward to seeing your results.